Growing up, I was always what one would call pretty scatterbrained. Since I was young, it always seemed like so many different things were bouncing around in my head. It was hard for me to focus on what others were saying or to stick to one task at a time. Now, despite this, my parents weren't too worried. This is because I did very well in school. I learned pretty quickly, had a really good memory. In elementary and middle school, I didn't really struggle too much, as most subjects just came pretty easily to me. However, I tended to daydream in class, a habit that frustrated my teachers. Although they talked to my parents about it, they never suggested ADHD. My teachers just didn't understand why this dedicated student struggled to follow the directions. So, when I entered high school, my scattered brain affected my life in worse ways. I had so many issues planning things, like writing college applications and studying for the SAT, and this inability to plan meant that I spent most of my time procrastinating and cramming. High school gave me constant anxiety. It was pure hell. In junior year, I had a mental breakdown and couldn't function anymore. I hated myself so much. Why couldn't I sit down and do what I had to do like a normal student? Eventually, after 18 years, I was treated for ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. ADHD is characterized by impulsivity and difficulty in paying attention. So, why was I diagnosed so late? The thing is, I did get a diagnosis when I was very young. The problem was that because I sat quietly in my chair and spoke only when I was asked to, my parents thought that I just didn't need any help or accommodations. And this perception that ADHD solely makes you hyper and rowdy affects many young girls. And because of these stereotypes, boys are more likely to be diagnosed. And as boys get help and attention, young girls are left behind to deal with this condition. Many don't get diagnosed until college. And this underdiagnosis of girls has serious consequences. Girls with ADHD have higher than average rates of certain mental health issues, such as self-harm and eating disorders. Undiagnosed ADHD also impacts a girl's self-esteem, as it deprives her of the necessary accommodations. I don't want other girls to go through what I and so many have had to go through. In order to do that, we need to end this idea that ADHD is a boy's disorder. This doesn't mean simply acknowledging that girls can get ADHD. It means recognizing that ADHD affects boys and girls equally. It also means knowing what ADHD looks like in girls. For example, girls with ADHD tend to be less hyper than boys. A young girl who can't pay attention but can still sit in a desk chair for long periods is as likely to have ADHD as a boy who's bouncing off of the walls. We should also be aware of the physiological differences in how women experience ADHD. Estrogen levels intensify symptoms in young women, and estrogen levels increase during puberty. The common belief doctors have that ADHD symptoms appear by the age of 12 doesn't account for this. In college, a woman's estrogen levels are still increasing, thus their symptoms are still developing. This, combined with them losing their regular high school routine, results in a frustrating freshman year for many young women. An awareness of how these differences manifest in young girls can save a lot of grief. If you believe that you are one of those girls who needs a diagnosis, there are ways to help you get your life back on track. You won't be able to undo all of the damage and trauma from being undiagnosed, but you will be able to set a clear and less stressful path for yourself in the future. For a diagnosis, you can go straight to the psychiatrist or psychologist for tests, or you can get your primary care physician to refer you to one. Be sure the professionals you seek are qualified to give you the adequate information. Know the difference between psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and so on and so forth. When it comes to treating ADHD, it is a multifaceted approach. For me, medication was helpful as it made it easier for me to focus. Of course, you should keep in mind that medication like Adderall aren't the only way to tame ADHD, or the only thing necessary to. A psychologist or therapist can help you manage your symptoms by providing certain skills that enhance your ability to focus and accomplish tasks. With me, my psychologist helped me devise a daily schedule and gave me tools to map out my long-term assignments. This helped with my planning and procrastination issues. One of the most important things to learn about having ADHD or any mental condition is to be kind and patient with yourself. Some days will be better than others, and doing badly on one day doesn't mean you're destined to fall back into old habits permanently or undo all of your progress. Just remember that you're figuring out how your brain works through no fault of your own. So do not feel bad for dozing off in class or for getting distracted on your phone for a few hours. You have a condition that you're still trying to navigate daily. In all, growing up as a young girl with ADHD is never easy, and I sometimes feel resentful that I didn't get help sooner. However, I need to remind myself, and I hope to remind you guys, that it is never too late to try to put the pieces of my scattered brain back together again. Thank you for listening.